They said they miss me this Thanksgiving, their voices dripping with a sweetness so thick it could choke you. But they forgot one crucial detail in their careful planning. Even from a nursing home bed, I can still read their posts, and more importantly, I can still hear the truth when they think no one is listening. I smirked, and in my mind's eye, I saw them getting down on their knees to beg me to come back. The first thing I heard that morning was not the gentle bird song from the California courtyard, nor was it the soft, rubber-soled steps of the nurse making her rounds. It was the sharp, intrusive click of the landline phone placed beside my bed, a relic they insisted I keep for emergencies. It was followed by voices they never, ever meant for me to hear. They thought they had ended the video call, but the connection lingered, a ghost in the machine. A small red icon in the corner of the tablet screen pulsed, muted but not disconnected, a tiny technological oversight that would unravel everything. Just tell her we miss her, so she'll crawl back to cook that turkey again. A voice hissed, stripped of its earlier warmth. There was a pause, a rustle of fabric, and then her voice, my daughter-in-law, Linda, always too loud when pretending to be kind and far too quiet when being cruel. Last time she slipped. We almost got lucky. We just need one more fall. Then came the laughter, a sound I knew as well as my own heartbeat. His laugh. My son, Mike. She's too dumb to read this stuff anyway, he added, the words a casual dismissal of my entire existence. Probably thinks a hashtag is some new kind of church group. The line stayed open. I lay perfectly still, my eyes fixed on the white acoustic tiles of the ceiling, their perfect grid broken by faint, spidery water stains in the corners, darkened by age and neglect. The chronic pain in my leg, the one they had caused, was a dull, familiar throb this morning, almost numb, but the ache spreading through my chest was a living thing, a slow-acting poison seeping into every part of me. I did not cry. Crying, I had decided long ago, was a luxury for women who still had something tangible to lose, for women who still believed in the goodness of the people they loved. I had lost that belief one agonizing piece at a time. Instead, I moved with a slowness that felt deliberate, almost ceremonial. My hand reached for the smartphone, resting on my lap, the one they hadn't bothered to take, the one the head nurse, Debbie, let me keep even though its battery barely held a charge. It's your window to the world, Ruth, she'd say with a kind smile. How funny. For years, all that window had ever shown me was a reflection of the people who had stopped looking in. My thumb, stiff with arthritis, scrolled through the screen. Most of the messages were fossils from another life. Automated texts from the pharmacy reminding me of prescriptions I no longer managed, holiday greetings from old church friends who were now gone, a blurry photo of a birthday cake from 3 years ago, sent with no accompanying words, a silent, half-hearted acknowledgement. I scrolled past it all, a digital graveyard of forgotten connections, until my eyes landed on the name I was looking for. Ethan. Just the name, plain and simple. Ethan, the boy with the glasses. 10 years ago, that name meant absolutely nothing to my son or his wife. But to me, he was a summer I had folded up and kept, a memory I refused to let fade. He was only 8 years old when his mother dropped him off, all sharp angles and bony knees, with a universe of unspoken questions hiding behind his two big glasses. She had pulled up in a beat-up sedan, explaining that she just needed some space for a week and that I looked like a nice old lady. The week turned into a season. I never judged her. I just fed her son. I made him oatmeal with extra honey and a sprinkle of cinnamon, the way my own father used to like it. I sat on the floor with him and patiently showed him how to tie his shoes with the one-loop method because the two-loop bunny ears just confused his little fingers. In the garden, I taught him the delicate art of watering tomatoes, how to give them just enough to drink without drowning their roots. At night, he would curl into the guest bed, a small, frightened animal in the vast darkness, and whisper stories to me. He told me about the bullies at school, about the scary noises his parents made through the walls, about his fear that if he spilled something or broke something, he would be sent away for good. I held every one of his words like a fragile treasure, never repeating a single one. Not to his mother when she finally returned, and not to anyone else. They were his to tell, and mine to keep safe. One sun-drenched afternoon, sitting at the kitchen table over peanut butter sandwiches with the crusts cut off, he looked up at me, a smear of jelly on his cheek, and said something that struck me with the force of a physical blow. "You're the first person who waits when I talk." He said it so simply, a plain fact. That was the very same day Linda had stopped by, seen me playing checkers with him on the porch, and later told Mike on the phone, in a stage whisper I was clearly meant to overhear, that I needed to stop spoiling other people's kids and focus on my real family. I tapped Ethan's name on the phone screen. It remained still an artifact of a bygone era. There was no new number, no updated profile, just a single photograph of him as I remembered him, a missing front tooth, those oversized glasses perched on his nose, and a faint smear of chocolate near the corner of his mouth. The day his mother finally came to pick him up, he had hugged me with such desperate strength that I felt my ribs shift and ache. "I'll always remember you, Ruth," he had sobbed into my floral apron. And I had told him that I would, too. I had meant it. A sound from the hallway pulled me back to the present. It was Debbie, the morning nurse, humming a cheerful, off-key tune from the radio. She would be in soon with my pills, the soft, scrambled eggs I could manage, and the gentle reminder to breathe through the pain. But for this moment, I lay in the profound silence of the California morning. Even in the middle of July, the chill of the air-conditioned nursing home settled deep into your bones, a constant, unwelcome reminder that you were no longer needed, not in the way you once were, not in the way that mattered. My fall had been an accident, they said, a tragic, unfortunate accident. Yes, it was an accident, but it was also an exit, a quiet, convenient removal. One less mouth to feed, one less opinion to ignore, one less name on the mailbox of a house they already considered theirs. They had never said it outright, of course. Their cruelty was always wrapped in the gauze of concern. They brought flowers to the hospital, cheap, wilting carnations from a gas station. They kissed my forehead with lips that tasted of lies, their hands cool and brief on my own. But when the doctor mentioned long-term rehab, their eyes lit up with a disturbing brilliance. They latched onto the word like a life raft. Yes, Mike had said, nodding with performative gravity. Yes, of course, she needs time. She needs the best care. They didn't come to the rehab facility, not once. They didn't call, except for that one time, 2 weeks in, when Linda needed to ask where I kept the good turkey baster. And now, this morning's phone call, a gift from their own carelessness. The red light on the landline had stopped blinking, the voices finally fading into static. Tell her we miss her, so she'll crawl back to cook that turkey again. They had said crawl, not come, not return. Crawl. The word slithered in my mind, as if I were a lowly creature on its hands and knees, pathetic and desperate for their scraps of approval, aching to be of use one last time. As if all the love I had poured into 1,000 family meals, all the holidays I had orchestrated, all the birthdays I had celebrated could be boiled down to a pan of gravy and forgotten the moment my hands began to tremble. I looked down at my leg, encased in plaster and gauze. A small black marker near the knee showed where the surgeon had signed his initials, as if even now my body belonged to someone else's decision, someone else's handiwork. I thought of Thanksgiving, of all the years I had stood in that kitchen, the heat of the oven on my face, basting, carving, stirring, and plating. I remembered the way they would smile, with full mouths, and take second helpings without a word of thanks. I remembered how Linda would always bring her own green bean casserole, a dish nobody ever touched, and place it directly in the center of the table like a declaration of war, a passive-aggressive claim to the territory. I remembered how my son would nod and joke. Mom still got it, but never once, not in 30 years, offered to help with the mountain of dishes afterwards. They thought I did it all because I had nothing better to do with my time, that my life had shrunk to fit the confines of that kitchen. They never understood. I did it because I loved them. I did it because feeding someone was my way of holding them close when they would no longer let themselves be held. I did it because I foolishly thought that maybe, just maybe, one more perfectly roasted turkey, one more flaky pie crust might finally make them see me. It never did. My gaze returned to Ethan's photo on my phone. You're the first person who waits when I talk. I had waited for 10 years since he left, and for a lifetime before that. I had waited through birthdays they forgot, and holidays they rushed through. I had waited through countless Mother's Days filled with those same cheap carnations and a heavy, suffocating silence. And now they were waiting for me to come home, to crawl, to cook. A small, strange smile touched my lips. It wasn't a smile of amusement. It was the smile of a person who suddenly remembers a trump card they had forgotten they were holding. I may be old, but my memory is a fortress. I remember the passwords to their first email accounts. I remember the location of the spare key to the safe deposit box. I remember the names on the deeds and the bank accounts they thought I knew nothing about. I remember where every important document is filed away. I remember every single recipe they took credit for at dinner parties. I remember every night they left me to eat my dinner alone in front of the television. I remember every gift I gave them that was later returned to the store for cash. I remember every time they whispered in the other room, thinking I was too slow, too deaf, too dumb to understand. And now I remembered Ethan, the boy with the glasses, the one person in recent memory who had looked at me and seen a person, not a set of chores, not a cook, not a casserole dish. My fingers, though stiff, felt surprisingly steady as I pressed the compose button. I began to type, each letter a small act of rebellion. Hi, Ethan. You probably don't remember me, but I never forgot you. My name is Ruth. You stayed with me one summer when you were a little boy. I still remember your stories about the stars. I hope life has been kind to you. I'm writing because I think I need someone who once saw me clearly, someone who knows I am not just a cook or a couch or a cast on a broken leg, someone who remembers that I am a person. I don't need anything from you. I just needed to say that I'm still here, still waiting when people talk. I paused, my finger hovering over the send button. It felt like stepping off a cliff. I pressed it. The screen blinked once. Message delivered. Outside in the hallway, the world continued its relentless churn. I heard fresh laughter, the jangling of keys, and someone asking if the cranberry juice had been ordered for the residents' lunch. The world kept spinning, and for the first time in a long time, I let it. I did not move. Not yet, because I had just done something more powerful than I had in years. I had chosen who to reach for. It wasn't a reach born of desperation, but one of absolute, chilling clarity. Let them wait for my stuffing, my gravy, my pumpkin, and apple pies. Let them carve their own damned bird this year. Let them miss me. Let them wonder, because I would not be crawling back. Not now. Not ever. A few hours later, a video call request popped up on my tablet. It was them. The screen flickered to life, revealing their smiling faces, pixelated by a shaky connection, but still sickeningly sweet. Hi, Mom, Mike said, his tone as syrupy and artificial as cheap maple flavoring. We were just thinking it would be really, really great to have you home for Thanksgiving this year. Linda leaned into the frame, her blonde curls sprayed into a stiff, immovable helmet. We miss you so much, she cooed. and the kids keep asking about Grandma's famous stuffing. I tilted my head slightly, making a show of pretending to adjust the volume, a frail old woman struggling with technology. The nurse had set the tablet upright for me on the rolling table earlier that morning. I kept my expression soft, my voice warmer and more fragile than I felt. "Oh, that's so sweet of you both. I'll think about it. Oh, think quick." Linda chirped, her brightness dialed up to an unbearable level. "Time's flying. Love you, Mom." The screen went dark, but they made the same mistake twice in one day. The call had not ended. The speaker stayed on. First came the clatter of a coffee mug being set down hard on a countertop, the scrape of a chair, then Mike's voice, sharp and cold as ice. "She almost bought it last time. A little extra cooking oil on those top stairs and boom. Inheritance unlocked." My breath caught in my chest. A sudden, sharp vacuum. No Walker for her this year. Linda added, her voice low, followed by a dry, cruel laugh that sounded like cracking twigs. "Let the stairs finish the job." The silence that followed was more horrifying than the words themselves. It was the silence of complete agreement, of shared and practiced cruelty, a wickedness so familiar to them it no longer registered as evil. Mike snorted. "Old hag still thinks we love her." My fingers trembled slightly where they rested on the thin blanket, but I made no sound, no gasp, no sudden movement, nothing to alert them that their audience was still present. Instead, I closed my eyes and let my head drift slowly to the side, as if sleep had finally claimed me again. A beat passed, then another. The silence stretched. Then I heard it, Mike's voice again, but this time laced with a thread of uncertainty. "Mom, are you still there?" I opened my eyes just enough to see the screen light up again. They had realized their mistake. Their faces, now pale and blinking, stared out, searching for any sign of a reaction. I summoned every ounce of self-control I possessed and offered a small, sleepy smile, just enough to crease the corners of my mouth. "Sorry," I murmured, my voice intentionally groggy. "I must have dozed off." Relief washed over their faces, so visibly it was almost comical. Mike chuckled, a short, awkward sound, rubbing the back of his neck. Linda forced a grin, so wide I thought her face might crack under the strain. "Well," she said, her voice overly bright again, "you get your rest. Come home soon. We miss you and your turkey stuffing." The screen went black for good this time. I stared at the quiet, dark tablet. They had nearly killed me once. An accident. They had called it. I had slipped on the stairs while carrying a pot of oil to refill the deep fryer. My leg had snapped like a dry matchstick. Linda's only expressed concern at the time had been about the oil stain on the hallway carpet. Now I knew. It was never, ever an accident. They wanted the house, the money, the accounts they thought I had forgotten about. They had waited long enough, smiled long enough, faked just enough holiday cheer to keep me trusting. But this year, something had changed. This year, they forgot I could hear. This year, they made one final fatal mistake. I reached again for my phone. The nurse had charged it overnight for me. Bless her heart. She said she liked that I still kept in touch with the world, not knowing that most of my conversations were with memories. Except for one. I scrolled until I found his name again. Ethan. I hadn't heard his voice in over a decade, but I could still picture the little boy who once hid behind my apron when the neighborhood kids mocked his glasses. The boy who cried in the laundry room because he'd spilled juice on the rug and thought no one would ever love him again. The boy who flinched every time someone raised their voice. He was older now. A man probably, but I gambled on the belief that some bonds don't age. I typed slowly, carefully. "Remember when you said you owed me one for hiding you from your bullies?" I stared at the message, my heart pounding against my ribs, then pressed send. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Then, My screen lit up with a reply. Yes, ma'am. You saved my life that summer. Now I'll save yours. I stared at those words until they blurred, the tears I refused to shed for my son now falling for the boy who was never mine. Outside my window, the sun was beginning to rise, spilling through the blinds in broken, golden lines across the linoleum floor. Somewhere down the hall, a radio played faint jazz, and the scent of toast and coffee drifted into my room. I closed my eyes, not in sleep, but in something sharper, colder, and far more powerful. Resolve. They thought they were the ones playing the long game. They thought they had finally worn me down. But I am not a fool, and as it turned out, I was not alone. 3 days later, they came to the nursing home. Mike wore his softest cashmere sweater, his sincere look. He brought me carnations, the cheap, garish kind from the gas station, their stems already browning. Linda followed behind him, wrapped in an expensive coat she didn't take off, though the room was kept uncomfortably warm. Her lipstick was too red, her smile too bright, a slash of color in her pale, anxious face. Mom, Mike said, bending to kiss my cheek. His breath smelled of coffee and deceit. You look great, stronger already. Linda set the flowers on the nightstand with a thud and pulled up a chair, her movements jerky and unnatural. Thanksgiving just isn't the same without your sweet potato casserole. The girls keep asking and asking when Grandma's coming home. I smiled at them. It was a specific kind of smile I had perfected over the years, one that doesn't reach the eyes but makes people lean in, confident they have been forgiven. Oh, sweetheart, I said, my voice soft as felt. How kind of you both to come all this way. Mike reached for my hand, and I let him take it. His palm was clammy. You'll sit at the head of the table this year, he promised, squeezing my fingers lightly. We've already moved the big armchair from the den. It's all ready for you. He had never let me sit at the head of the table before, not once. Not when I cooked everything for 20 people, not even after his father passed away. And I was the only one left to carry the family's stories. But now that they thought I was a fragile prop in their final act, I was to be placed front and center like a dying queen whose crown had begun to tarnish. We'll pick you up early Thursday morning, Linda said, standing up abruptly. That way, you can rest for a bit before dinner. How thoughtful, I replied, my voice a gentle whisper. They were so sure they had won, so confident in my weakness and their own cleverness. They had absolutely no idea that the game had changed, that Ethan and I had already begun to move the pieces on a board they didn't even know existed. The microphone was a tiny marvel, tucked neatly into the collar of my favorite lavender cardigan. It was sewn in place just beneath the lapel by Debbie, who thought she was helping me repair a loose thread from the laundry. She didn't ask any questions, just smiled her warm smile, stitched with practice skill, and told me I looked dignified. The camera was Ethan's masterstroke. It was tiny, no bigger than a shirt button, and ingeniously hidden in the plush cushion of the living room armchair, the very one I always sat in during the holidays. He had mailed it directly to the nursing home in a box labeled orthopedic mobility cushion. The staff, bless their busy hearts, never opened it. They just assumed it was some new piece of equipment that Medicare had approved. The police already had the preliminary file. Ethan, it turned out, had made sure of that. He hadn't just grown into a man. He had become something formidable. A highly sought-after cybersecurity expert in Silicon Valley. He specialized in tracking digital threats, creating undeletable evidence trails, and building cases that couldn't disappear when people hit delete on their sins. It's a different kind of war now, Ruth, he had told me on the phone, his voice deeper and more resonant than I remembered, but still underlined with that same gentle spirit. You don't have to fight loud. You just have to press record. And so we prepared. As Mike and Linda chattered cheerfully about seating arrangements and which brand of cranberry sauce to buy, I listened, nodding in all the right places, my mind 1,000 miles ahead of them, plotting a course through the battlefield they had laid out. I had a printed copy of the transcript from their accidental, incriminating call. Ethan had cleaned up the audio, enhanced their voices, and emailed me the text. It sat folded neatly in my purse now, a quiet bombshell, just in case they needed a little reminding. But not today. Today, I would play my part to perfection. The tired, old mother, grateful, forgetful, and utterly harmless. I'm so glad we'll all be together again, I whispered as they prepared to leave, my voice catching with just the right amount of emotion. Linda touched my shoulder, her touch light and meaningless. We love you, Mom. I looked her directly in the eye, holding her gaze until she shifted uncomfortably. I know. That was enough for today. They left with their bright, false smiles and empty promises, the kind you make to someone you believe will not survive the winter. I watched them walk to their polished car from my window. Mike adjusted his collar in the reflection. Linda checked her lipstick in the side mirror. They looked like people attending a funeral for someone who was still breathing. They were, in fact, walking directly into their own reckoning. Later that evening, I called Ethan. He answered on the first ring. They came, I said simply. Did they say anything suspicious? He asked, his voice all business. No, I replied. They're saving all of that for Thursday. Good, he said, a hint of satisfaction in his tone. That's when we go live. Ethan had already set the entire system in motion. The microphone on my sweater would connect wirelessly to a recording device through a tiny transmitter he had cleverly hidden in the heel of my new orthopedic shoe. It was programmed to begin recording the moment I stepped inside their house. The living room camera would activate the instant I sat down in the armchair. He had programmed it with facial recognition software keyed to my face. It would track their movements, record the entire conversation, and send live, time-stamped audio and video clips directly to a secure server he had set up for the police department's cybercrimes unit. If anything happened, if they so much as raised their voices in a threatening manner, it would be logged, time-stamped, and automatically forwarded to the lead detective on the case. The plan was brutally simple. All I had to do was let them be themselves, let them speak freely in the privacy of their own home, because the cruel never, ever believe that the quiet ones will rise up, especially when the quiet one is wearing orthopedic shoes and has a reputation for baking pies. I still can't believe you do this for a living, I said, a small smile playing on my lips as I spoke into the phone. I do it because of you, he replied, his voice softening. You're the reason I got out of that house. You taught me not to be afraid of the truth, no matter how ugly it is. I closed my eyes, letting his words settle over me like a warm tea, soothing the frayed edges of my nerves. Ethan, I whispered, whatever happens tomorrow, thank you. No, he said, his voice firm and resolute. Whatever happens, you don't thank me. You survive. You get your justice. And you sit at the head of that table. I let out a small chuckle. Only if there's real butter for the rolls this year. You got it, he promised. We hung up. I turned to look at myself in the small mirror on the dresser. My face was a road map of my years, my hair thinner than it once was, but my eyes still held a fire they had failed to extinguish. I remembered every insult, every dismissal, every time they had called me slow, forgetful, useless. They made the common mistake of thinking old age was the same as weakness. But wisdom is the long game, and revenge, I was discovering, is a dish best served with perfect clarity and overwhelming evidence. That night, I didn't sleep much. I sat up in my bed with a pen and a pad of paper and wrote out my recipes by hand. The real ones, the ones Linda had always begged for but never got right. The secret to my flaky pie crust, the exact blend of spices for my stuffing, the trick to getting the sweet potato casserole perfectly caramelized. I tied the stack of recipe cards with a simple red ribbon and placed them in my suitcase. Let her think she had won something precious when she inevitably stole them from my bag. Let her try to bake them and find out they were all missing one secret, irreplaceable ingredient: me. Thanksgiving was coming, and I would be there, just not in the way they expected. Thanksgiving morning arrived wrapped in a shroud of golden lies. The sun shone with an offensive brightness for late November. The air in their neighborhood smelled of cinnamon, cloves, and cold, hard calculation. Mike's car, a luxury SUV polished to a mirror-like perfection, pulled up to the nursing home entrance at 8:43 a.m. sharp. Linda stepped out first, her coat swinging, holding a Tupperware container of pre-cut garnishes she would later claim to have chopped herself. Mike followed, radiating fake warmth and wearing that same practiced smile he used at funerals and when signing mortgage documents. They helped me into the car with a gentleness that was almost suffocating, cooing about my comfort and safety. I thanked them, my voice a fragile whisper. Inside, Linda had lit every scented candle in the house. The cloying aroma of rosemary and vanilla mingled with the scent of the roasting bird. The table was a spectacle of feigned celebration. Napkins were folded into elaborate swans. The good china was polished to a high sheen, and the silverware, which hadn't seen the light of day since my husband's wake, gleamed under the recessed lighting. The stage was set for a joyous family reunion, but the air itself buzzed like a high-tension wire stretched to its breaking point and ready to snap. I was placed at the head of the table as promised, in the big, comfortable armchair, the one they usually kept stored in the garage to make more room for their own guests. Children, my grandchildren, ran past me, their faces bright with holiday excitement, blissfully unaware of the silent, vicious tension that was slicing through the room. Linda called for them to wash their hands, her voice coated in a thick layer of sugar. Mike hummed a cheerful tune while stirring the gravy, his eyes darting over to me every few seconds as if he were checking for signs of weakness or imminent collapse. They thought I had returned out of love, out of guilt, out of loneliness and forgetfulness. They thought they had successfully pulled all the strings, and their little puppet had danced right back into their trap. They had no idea that Ethan was already in position, parked in an unassuming sedan down the street, watching, listening, and recording everything. The microphone nestled beneath my collar was capturing every whispered exchange, every false endearment. The tiny lens in the armchair cushion was pointed directly at the dining room, where their dark intentions were simmering at a higher temperature than the sweet potatoes. Dinner was served at 3 p.m. sharp. The entire family bowed their heads as Mike performed a short, empty prayer about gratitude and grace, his voice trembling with manufactured emotion in all the right places. As he finished, Linda squeezed my hand under the table and mouthed the words, "Welcome home." Then they began to carve the turkey and pour the wine. The room filled with the buzz of chatter. My grandchildren passed dinner rolls, made jokes about their teachers, and asked me questions about school I couldn't possibly answer. The lies were stacked higher than the mashed potatoes on my plate. I listened to it all in a profound, internal silence, chewing each bite slowly, methodically, letting the warmth of the food melt into the cold steel that had formed beneath my ribs. At exactly 3:26 p.m., Mike stood up, a wine bottle in his hand. "Mom," he said, his voice cheerful and booming, "how about we make a toast to your return?" He grinned at the assembled family, his hand twisting the corkscrew. "To Mom." Just as he began to pour, the large television on the living room wall, which had been dark for hours, clicked on by itself. The screen lit up in a cold, sharp, high-definition resolution. It was playing a video from their own kitchen, with their own voices filling the sudden, dead silence of the room. It was the clip Ethan had expertly cleaned and edited. First, Linda's voice. "She's worth more dead than alive, Mike." Then, "No walker, no rail." Boom. A slight pause in the recording, and then Mike's voice again, dripping with contempt. "Old hag still thinks we love her." The room froze. Forks hovered midair. Wine glasses trembled in unsteady hands. One of the younger children whispered, "What's that, Daddy?" Linda dropped her knife. It clattered against her plate with the sound of a gunshot. Mike lunged for the remote control on the side table, but the screen was locked, controlled from miles away. And then came the lights. Flashing strobes of blue and red flooded the dining room windows, painting the walls in the colors of emergency. Outside, 2 squad cars were parked across their perfectly manicured lawn, their engines rumbling with a low, steady purpose. Doors opened, and heavy footsteps echoed on the brick walkway. Then came the knock on the front door, firm, final, and undeniable. 3 police officers entered without waiting for an invitation. And behind them stood Ethan, no longer the small, frightened boy I had once hidden from bullies. He stood tall and straight, wearing a black coat zipped high against the chill, his eyes sharp and focused. A woman in a detective's suit stepped forward, her voice calm, measured, and absolute. "Mike Ransom, Linda Ransom, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, and financial exploitation of a dependent adult." Mike's mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no sound came out. Linda let out a choked sob and dropped her wine glass. It shattered on the hardwood floor, the red wine spreading across the polished wood like a pool of blood. In what felt like slow motion, the turkey slid off its platter, staining the white tablecloth with a greasy smear. My youngest granddaughter began to cry, a thin, wailing sound. And me, I took a slow sip of water, set the glass down with a steady hand, and rose slowly from my chair, feeling stronger than they had ever imagined I could be. "You said you missed me," I said quietly, my voice cutting through the chaos. All eyes in the room turned to me. Mike's face had flushed a deep, mottled purple. Linda stumbled backward, her hand flying to her mouth. "But what you really missed," I continued, my voice gaining strength with each word, "was control." I took a deep breath, the air clean and sharp in my lungs. "And I missed nothing, not even your hashtags." The officers moved forward. Mike shouted something incoherent, a slurred, unfinished denial. Linda began to scream, pointing a trembling finger at me, then at the screen, then at Ethan. "This is insane. She's manipulating you. She's senile." But the proof had spoken for itself. The house, the microphones, the video, they were no longer just tools. They were witnesses. Mike was cuffed first, his resistance collapsing in an instant. Linda followed, fighting and clawing like a cornered cat. As they were led away, their perfect Thanksgiving dinner left to grow cold, I looked across the ruined scene at Ethan. He gave me a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Justice doesn't always have to shout. Sometimes it just sits quietly at the head of the table and waits for the right moment to press play.